faced, completely blacked out by paint several times, and also to get guidance as to how we might have this amenity returned for full use by the community, knowing we would likely have to approach our local board, of course, for funding for that. At the same time, other residents were engaged with the proposed subdivision issues arising at 42A Codrington Crescent, and we too advocated in our personal submissions to Council that any development should enable the community to gain access, a footpath only, from the top of the Nihil Reserve, which you can see in your documents, out onto Codrington Crescent, currently a large piece of land you can see there. And this was on the basis in theory that any building intensity such as a subdivision requires public land for all to engage with, given the effects of intensity upon communities, especially when a subdivision such as this one being proposed was to be packed very tightly with homes. So it is incomprehensible to us how council correspondence, i.e. mention in any of the few reports such as attached to your agenda today, has failed to inform you as our representatives that such advocacy was going on, while council staff correspondingly worked with Panuki, it appears, since August 2015, advising them they felt there was no interest or no use for this reserve. We have recently requested the documents and background related to this current resolution before you, and as none have been provided by Council, we have reason to doubt that such documents exist. And why do we think this? After seeking an urgent meeting with representatives of the Ōrākei Local Board on February the 18th this year, after we discovered the board had approved a resolution for revocation of this reserve, we became seriously concerned that the Ōrākei board had not received all the facts from Council, given we have been attempting to have this reserve tidied up and returned to the community for over 3 years. Clearly none of this information was provided by Parks in their submission. Why not? We doubt there are any documents and reports which provide any analysis of the reserve in its context as a community asset, aside from its history, i.e. the acquisition in the early years, as further to the concerns and a failure to get any further feedback from the Ōrākei board following the February meeting. We have become aware in the last 48 hours that the Land Contamination Unit in Council has not completed a detailed report, only called Desktop. And further, the Karimarama Mission Bay Residents Association have informed us yesterday that they too were not consulted despite the Ōrākei Local Board minutes of their resolution to agree to revocation on the 5th of November, stating that, and I quote, consultation has taken place with them about the sale of 49 Nihil Crescent Mission Bay. This is untrue. Their minutes also include neighbouring residents were consulted. Yet this reserve isn't just about the immediate neighbours, as anyone looking at the topography must have asked themselves who owned the really large piece of land that adjoins the top part of this reserve, and surely those of us who have been advocating for use and access should have been consulted at this time. We'd argue that we are neighbours. Further, their recommendation to support this resolution, and I quote, is based on feedback endorsing Panuki development to dispose of it, but there is no evidence of the feedback. What feedback and from whom? This area is special character, historic character under Auckland City zoning. Nihil Reserve is dedicated plantation reserve to be in keeping with the 2B special character and therefore extends to bush and bird life, which is a key characteristic of the surrounding area. Council recognised in Isthmus B that the zoning is about pattern and density, and I stress mature vegetation, as well as heritage buildings. It appears that in making the decisions about the potential sale or revocation, the decision makers have believed that the reserve terminated in private property. They were not made aware that the current vacant land at 42A Codrington Crescent has easement engrossed to Council, and this easement is being for access to the Council's stormwater retention dam at the southeast corridor of the land, and there's be a handout that will be attached to show you this. Why would they want to sell it to private owners and complicate the need for such easement? Recommendations. One of the important requirements as the intensification of our city continues is that green space and access to walking, cycling and being engaged with our natural surroundings, such as reserves and native bush, is critically important for our well-being and for those of our future generations. With the proposed development and subdivision likely in Codrington Crescent, we would have hoped Council would act as our advocate and would negotiate with this or any developer for this reserve to be tidied up and returned to the community as with a potential pathway out and up towards Keeper Road. In light of the recent reduction in bus services, these issues have become even more important. Further to the Council's own unitary plan.
Mrs Holcomb, you've actually extended the 5 minutes.
Sorry, I will table that there are a number of issues that are reflected, and I would like to lastly add that iwi, we were disappointed to note that iwi have not supported the retention of the reserve and would suggest that possibly they too have not had enough. Lastly, we would ask and urgently ask that you seek more time, more information to consider the complexity of the overlapping aspects of this resolution, much of which does not appear to have been considered nor consulted before you decide to sell it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for your presentation there. I'm over here.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you've got a peripheral vision. Thank you very much. That's a very good presentation. You mentioned the fact that this strip of land acts as a bit of an ecological corridor for, for bush bird life and nickel palms and whatnot. Just looking at the overview of the streets, and I think you alluded to it in terms of a access point for a number of the residents around here, not just recreational, but perhaps walking to and from various parts. Is that a logical route that people from some of these surrounding streets would take to get to places in the immediate environs?
Yes, absolutely. Naihill Crescent has become increasingly quite a thoroughfare, certainly people dropping down from Kohimarama Road and going to the beach, but the ability to get up to Keeper Road and up to Eastridge, this would make quite a shortcut for people to be able to go up there, because at the moment you have to go right down the bottom of Naihill, turn right and walk all the way up Patterson Avenue. And the bus services, as I said, have recently been reduced.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. So you've had engagement with council officers, and then it was just in February 18 you went to the local board. Did you go to the local board earlier, or it was February 18? And what was the follow-up from the local board back to you after you expressed your concerns, at least on February 18 and possibly prior?
Okay, I haven't alluded in here that we did actually approach, probably about 18 months ago, we did approach the chair of the local board, and his executive support person said that it would be followed up. But I'm a busy person, and people have lots of, we must do something, but actually we sort of rather drop the ball a little bit around that, because we didn't hear anything and nothing happened. And so the subsequent to that was finding out that this resolution had gone forward, approaching the board on the 18th and getting a meeting, and we have emailed them, we have asked them, and we have followed up quite a number of times, certainly in the last week, and we have had no reply.
Okay, and just in terms, my second question, in terms of the engagement that has not happened with the Kohi Residents Group, but the report, the original report to the board says that did take place, do you know, and you're confirming that it definitely did not take place? One
of the members of the board rang me yesterday when they discovered that I was going to present today, to tell me that, having seen those minutes, I needed to know that there had been no consultation with them at all. Okay,
and with the neighbours, there's some narrative about in the original report, so there was some engagement with neighbours. Do you know, is this the immediate neighbours, or is it the affected community? Do you know how narrow or wide that might have been?
No, I don't, and this has been part of my follow-up and requests and phone calls to a particular person in Parks who I've been dealing with. I then asked, when we found out about the revocation resolution of the board, for all correspondence that had happened to do with the Naiho Reserve, and all I got was copies back of all my emails that I'd kept anyway with this particular person in Parks.
Okay, there's some questions there for later. I'm happy to second. Maybe Councillor Brewer would like to move it.
Councillor Mike Lee.
Yes, thank you very much for this. Can I thank you for going to the trouble? I know all the hassle and concern that people go through when they hear about these sorts of plans by the council. So thank you for your presentation, and I'm sorry that you've been put under stress. In terms of the reserve management, rather than flogging it off, are you saying it could make a suitable walkway or perhaps even a cycle?
Yes, you can enter the reserve area from Naiho Crescent currently, but what has happened is the first 3 or 4 houses, or there's 3 units and then a house, which you can see probably on your topography diagram, they have taken over to some extent the use of the reserve, because obviously there hasn't been any care taken, and entrants down there, including with the park officer 18 months ago, were rather met with what are you doing on our land, but they do know it's a reserve. And so that is a little bit tricky, but the parks people then start to organise for parts of the reserve further up to be cleaned out of ginger and various things, but that hasn't been maintained. I think there's been a little bit of opposition from some of the people who currently are using the reserve. But once you get past those houses, if it's cleared, you definitely could make a really nice pathway up, and then it goes up the hill. And as I argue, they are required to put some access, a road, into 42A Codrington, hence the logic that we community members, people part of this, can see that it would be reasonable to get a small footpath out of the top, because one of the problems with this reserve is that it hasn't been looked after, and that's probably because there hasn't been access. But there's lots of reserves you go into where you can't get out each end, so I'm arguing that you still should be allowed to go into it on behalf of many people.
Because of its intrinsic value.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Potential
it's very
intrinsic
beautiful
value.
potential.
Thank you.
And Councillor Cashmore.
Councillor Darby covered most of my questions. Robin's good to see you again.
Well,
So there's no formed pathway. The vegetation's of limited value because it's been infested with weeds and it's been neglected over the years. Do you have any indications from the local boards who are responsible for parks about their indication of including this into a potential parks budget for it?
no, because that has been the frustration, Bill, about, you know, where to next. And I have copies of emails in October last year. You know, as I said, I'm a busy person. I'm deputy chair of board and another board. I'm, you know, a grandmother. I work. I'm an education consultant. You know, you're doing this in your spare time, and others talk about it, and then you think, I must send another email. So I was in discussion by email about this, asking the person in Parks, where could we go now to pull this together to advocate, because I know the process, you have to go to the board and get money to be able to have that put into budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Right, Councillor Brewer, do you wish to move we thank Mrs. Holcomb?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'll talk to
Councillor Darby will second that. So thank you very much, Mrs. Holger. The item will be on pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to the presentation.
Thank you. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare the motion carried. Thank you. We now move to item